So I think that, you know, one thing that I always do when I give a talk is I say, who here isn't a copyright criminal? And chances are no hands go up.
Copyright clause, or as we like to refer to it, the progress clause, which says Congress has the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. This is a strange clause in the Constitution. It explicitly connects the means to the ends. Exclusive rights here are to promote progress. And the limited times that constitute a constitutional copyright term are also designed to promote progress.
You can actually look at that as a way that it encourages creativity. If you're an author and your book, you're making money off your book, but your book goes into the public domain, say, in 20 years, well, that gives you a certain kind of impetus to maybe keep writing more books. You know, maybe if you just have one super hit bestseller or a big hit single, and you can profit off it forever and pass it on to your kids.
This idea in which we all pretend that copyright law is enforceable as it stands, that digital rights management works, that none of us are really copyright criminals, and that copyright criminals are bad guys who should all go to jail. You know, even Edgar Bronfman Jr.'s kids have admitted to being copyright criminals.
So in 1790, the first copyright statute is passed. It grants copyrights for 14 years, renewable once, total of 28 years. That stayed the law for about 40 years. Then in 1831, passed another statute, 28 years, renewable for 14 years, for a maximum of 42 years. That term stays for about 80 years. Then in 1909, Congress extended the law again, granting a 28-year term, renewable by a 28-year term for a maximum of 56 years. This one stays for just 50 years, and then we get into a cycle that might be described as addiction. Beginning in 1962, the term extends and extends and extends and extends and extends for existing copyrights until the 1976 Copyright Act, which creates a life plus 50 for all works going forward, except corporate works, which get a term of 75 years. And then in 1998, the Sonny Bono Copyright Term Extension Act, otherwise known as the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, extends the term to life plus 70 or 95 years for existing works, an additional 20 years. They went first to Germany to get Germany to extend their term by 20 years, arguing that the war interrupted copyright functioning, so they ought to extend the term to deal with the war. Then they went to the EU and told the EU that they needed to extend their term because Germany had just extended their term. Then they came to the United States and told the United States it had to extend the term because the EU had extended the term. But then when the United States extended their term, the EU was then told it had to extend the term some more because when the United States tried to match the EU by extending the term according to the EU's term, turned out we missed the mark and we extended our term beyond the term for some copyrighted works that the EU had set.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' new copyright regime is far from being a made-in-Canada solution. It's a knockoff. It's a bootleg, cheap copy of the American law, a rip-off of DMCA. The government claims users have the right to copy their CD onto a digital device, but not if the record company doesn't want them to. All it takes is one PIC digital lock and music lovers are on the hook for $20,000 in fines. Will they admit their made-in-the-USA law is going to get Canadian consumers sued?
For these, there is no justification grounded in the policy of copyright for this copyright term extension. And in that sense, too, it struck me that this extension was unconstitutional.
There's another thing that doesn't make sense is these estates of people who want to make money off of something that their father or grandfather invented or created. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. You didn't make it. He did.
The system I think we live in today is one in which if you have lots of lawyers and lots of money, you can do a lot, and one in which where you have few lawyers or few resources, you're very constrained. You know, clearing samples, getting copyrights, and so on. All that stuff requires affiliation with a big corporate entity and a lot of legal counsel, a lot of money.
There was a there was a point where the labels said, hang on, you know, you're taking this person's work lock, stock and barrel and claiming it as your own. We need some recompense, which is quite right, really. I think that stifled a lot of people, set people back, because similar to myself, where they don't consider themselves musicians, they're editors, they're taking other people's work to facilitate their own, really, in a lot of ways.
I often feel almost they've got a bit of a cheek, you know, when they start picking on someone who's doing a small-time record. You know, it just seems like, well, what exactly is your problem? You've just made millions of dollars. You've made sure that unless you live in a cave, you cannot avoid your awful products.
All these things have created this bizarre climate that we're in right now. You know, where these issues about ownership and private property and the stuff that's happening with downloading and file sharing, it's this incredibly complicated collision of all kinds of different mindsets, a lot of which are not very well examined. But the reaction from the music industry to stop file sharing makes perfect sense from their standpoint. You know, they have to profit from every single opportunity they can. There are no moments that they can. There's no transactions. There are no cultural transactions between human beings that can happen, that can go on without a toll being attached to them. That's not allowed, because our job is to make money, because that's what the corporate charter says. You know, you're supposed to make money for your shareholders. So
I think there are a lot of potential threats and challenges coming from so-called intellectual property law. It's often unfortunate that things like, you know, renewals of copyright to ever longer periods and things like this, well, the lawmakers have only had the input from people who argue that this is necessary. And there's always the danger that that's the only people they're going to listen to, is the people who have deep pockets because they're making a lot of money by monopolizing content that they shouldn't.
But if you're outside of the studio context, it's basically impossible. If you're, you know, a 10-year-old in your garage sampling music that you want to put on the internet, there's just no one at EMI or Warner's or whomever who's going to answer your phone call.